I've spoken to a few MPs this week, and they don't even think that it's possible that it's true. I mean, it's been reported that this is one of the proposals that the US has been put forward, but they can't even get their head around the fact that it might actually be true that they would recognize Crimea just because of the absolutely devastating consequences that would have for just the international rules-based order.
Listening to that was Chris York, who is the news operations editor at the Kyiv Independent. Good morning.
Morning.
How is this going down in Ukraine? I mean, the news that this meeting in London now looks like it will be downgraded to official level, where it would have been Rubio, Witkoff and David Lammy attending. How will that be perceived, do you think?
I mean, it's just another incredibly frustrating part of this whole process. I mean, put yourself in Ukrainian shoes. This is literally the future of their country at stake. And if you look at Witkoff especially, he's taken the time to meet Vladimir Putin 3 times. And now, we learned overnight that he's not even going to take the time to meet America's own allies in London. So, yeah, it's incredibly frustrating to watch it play out from here.
And there have been a number of attacks in recent days in Ukraine, which the suggestion is that they are now being targeted directly at civilians, those Russian attacks. How accurate is that? How different does it feel there to the way that it's felt over previous weeks and months?
So in Kyiv, I mean, before this, the partial ceasefires came into effect, we were getting hit by drones every single night. And there was a slight reduction of that when this energy infrastructure ceasefire sort of came into force, although how effective it was is still up for debate. But overnight, and the reason why I've got quite big bags under my eyes, as the alarms were ringing again overnight, there was more drone attacks coming. Odessa, the night before last, got hit really, really hard. But then, Russia was still attacking civilian targets during these so-called ceasefires as well. We saw what happened in Kryvyi and in Sumy. It was the deadliest attack this year. So, I mean, it's impossible to say to any kind of level of certainty that Russia's kind of pulled back on attacks on civilians at all.
Are these civilian attacks a deliberate ploy by Russia, do you think? Is it to sort of weaken Ukrainian resolve? Is that what you think is going on here?
Well, if it is, it's been ineffective because we've been putting up with this for years now. But I mean, it's basically terrorism. These drones that they send over, like the big missile attacks, cost Russia millions of pounds because these cruise and ballistic missiles cost loads of money. But these drones that they send over constantly are really, really cheap. Even if they don't hit anything, if you're in one of the major cities, you get woken up by the alarms and then the air defenses kind of taking them down. And it's just basically a form of terrorism that is probably aimed at wearing down the civilian population, but I don't think it's been effective. No one in Kyiv is wanting to give up because of drone attacks.
Finally, Chris, there is a lot of talk today in the papers over here about the potential for Ukraine to be asked to hand over Crimea, hand over other territory to Russia, that America would accept that it was now Russian territory and that Ukraine would not be allowed to join NATO. Most people think that Ukraine would never accept any of those terms. Is there any possibility that any of that would ever be acceptable?
I mean, the Crimea point is the real sticking issue. I've spoken to a few MPs this week, and they don't even think that it's possible that it's true. I mean, it's been reported that this is one of the proposals that the US has been put forward, but they can't even get their head around the fact that it might actually be true that they would recognize Crimea just because of the absolutely devastating consequences that would have for just the international rules-based order. It would reward Russia for aggression. It would counteract over a decade of US policy on Crimea. And I mean, one MP that I spoke to compared it to Munich in 1938 in terms of how consequential it would be and the sort of precedent that it would set for other countries which might have some authoritarian tendencies. But I think your previous guest, Mr. Pfeiffer, mentioned this as well. But I think the really important thing to mention here that needs to be concentrated on is that Ukraine on March the 11th agreed to a full 30-day ceasefire, and Russia has refused. And absolutely everything that they have said since and that are saying now is just noise and distraction. And unfortunately, the Trump administration seems to be swallowing it whole.
Chris, thank you very much for joining us. That was Chris York there, the news operations editor at the Kyiv Independent.
Catherine Philp is the Times World Affairs editor. Morning, Catherine.
Good morning.
I feel like I'm going a bit mad here because ultimately all the things that are being discussed as potential deals, clearly, manifestly, at least one, maybe two of the parties would never, ever agree to it. So I don't know what we're doing here.
Well, this is in part the nature of peace deals, and it tends to be why they are usually staged and you don't go for all of the outcomes immediately. Okay, so that's why there was originally that suggestion of the 30-day ceasefire that both the US and Ukraine endorsed and that Russia balked at and tried to change the terms of and limit it just to attacks on infrastructure, which it then broke anyway. This is what it appears from this plan we are hearing about that Vladimir Putin has endorsed, is that he wants to go for the whole solution in one, which is a freezing along the front line, which is, something that we've talked about a lot as being a potential outcome. But along the line, after other things have happened, after the guns have possibly fallen silent. I mean, I think that some of the suggestions of your American guest just there were fairly extraordinary, that we somehow shoehorn in European reassurance force without any backing from the US. I mean, that's been ruled out by Europe already. There are certain things that have to be agreed on by both sides to work, and you're right, we're simply too far apart at the moment. And again, this is why in general you would try and take these issues a few at a time and not try and achieve all of it in one go.
And your reaction, Catherine, to this, what's happened overnight? There's going to be a big summit in London about peace, and what's happened is Rubio said he won't come, Witkoff said he won't come, and Lammy has said overnight now he's not even going to chair it. That's presumably a pretty strong visual metaphor for the problems we've got here.
Yes, I agree. And again, I thought there was a rather sunny version just then about Rubio certainly not coming. I mean, the fact is Lammy has been put in an impossible situation. This is literally just diplomatic protocol, that if your counterpart suddenly cancels at the last minute, you can't just show up. It's too much of a slap in the face, and it becomes pointless anyway. Witkoff clearly is the one you need in the room. But again, Witkoff has never met the Europeans. He's always been meeting with the Russians, not even the Ukrainians. There's been this bizarre split negotiation where Keith Kellogg has been, assigned to a sort of sidelined process by the Europeans and the Ukrainians. So it was at first seen as progress that the Europeans had even kind of got themselves on the map in this discussion, only for Witkoff and Rubio to pull out. I think it is a bad sign, and I think it's reflective of what Rubio warned a week ago, that Trump could just walk away. Now, that could be a negotiating tactic. It could also be a sign of Trump's frustration. The idea that it's leverage over Putin, well, we just haven't seen much of that from Trump. We haven't seen him actually exercising much leverage over Putin. There's been the odd threat over these oil sanctions. But, if you consider the larger geopolitics of what Trump thinks he's trying to achieve here, one of which has been referred to as a reverse Kissinger, or reverse Nixon, of trying to separate out China from Russia. He's not going to then, put equal punishment on Russia, China, and India when he's trying to separate out those countries from one another and stop those alliances from developing any further.
Yeah.
So
it's such a good point. Yeah, it's such a good point. Maybe he's playing 4D chess, maybe he's not. It's also the thing that always nags at our mind. Catherine, great to speak to you as ever. That's Catherine Philp, the Times World Affairs editor.